Hey there, I'm Greg Nicotero.
Hi, my name is Coleman Domingo.
Hi, I'm Benai Garcia.
Hi, I am Mo Collins.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik, Igrihe, and Ryan.
This is episode 102 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I'm your host and the Morris Day of podcasting, Cinik. And joining me, as always, my very own version of the time, Igrihe and Ryan. And on this week's show, we break down the latest episode of The Walking Dead entitled Chokepoint. It's time for the big Beta versus Daryl showdown. Find out who won, who lost, and who might be spending a few nights in an elevator shaft. But if that's not enough, wait, there's more. The fans of the show kept saying to me, Cinik, weekly you tell us everyone deserves a spot at the table, don't you? What happened to the female perspective on your show? Well, I've read your emails and I went out and found an amazingly talented artist, knowledgeable in all things geek culture, named Kim, and she's going to help us review Captain Marvel, because we are the Cinik Radio Podcast. Like, listen, subscribe, but more importantly, go out and check out Kim's art on Instagram. It's in the show description. Previously on The Walking Dead, we got an in-depth look at roughing it, Whisperers style, how they live, where the masks come from, conflict resolution, which was pretty hard. It was also far from easy street as Lydia and Henry were rescued by Daryl and Connie, and the chase is on. IG, it looks like Daryl may be the reason the herd strolled into Whispererville, and there was a loss of life because of it. Could these actions be what really kicks off the conflict between the two parties?
It could be, but I mean, it really looks like it's more going to be, hey, you took our kid and we want her back, and now even if we get her back, we can't let bygones be bygones. We're just going to screw everything up. The Whisperers have a weird way of living, and I'm kind of enjoying it, but it's still kind of off-putting all at the same time. I'm enjoying this is happening. I'm wishing that we had this more. This last episode was really, really good. Like, for a change, like we're really starting to get some motion, which I'm happy about. And just some really good acting by everybody involved. But they just seem to be so single-minded in their effort, almost like, the Borg or something. They're just, everybody's going to do the same thing. And it's weird. And I think once they set their mind that they're going to go after something, they're just going to go after something.
As the fan base goes, Connie crazy. Even Dog seems to be a fan. Was it any surprise that she took the lead, Ryan, in that situation? I mean, in the last few episodes, it really has been kind of her coming out party, right?
Yeah, I think she's showing to be a really strong character and somebody who we would all consider to be a huge disadvantage in this world. She's really made it out and has been able to not only survive, but really excel in that. So I think, I'm not surprised. And I really like her character and where it's going. And, it's made for one of the more interesting new characters on the show in a really long time, especially in that, she can't just communicate like everybody else. And, I think the performance is really strong. And, even that scene with the baby a few weeks ago, I wasn't here to review, but it was really, really great. I mean, I don't deal with that disability, but they really captured what one would think that kind of tension and, terror would be like. And she's been great so far.
She really has. And it's really kind of been a breath of fresh air that these new people they brought in, they're not a hindrance to everybody else, that they can kind of handle themselves, and they're kind of meshing well with what's already there. And I think a lot of that is due to really, really good acting. I think they casted well in these circumstances. And I'm with you, Ryan. I really love how they did that scene. I think it was about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago now at this point, where, you couldn't hear and everything was muffled and things were popping out at her. It was kind of like a haunted house came to life. Hats off for that. And I like the fact that the most capable of the group seems to be somebody with a disability. That speaks volumes to where they're kind of headed as far as the writing and character progression. And I don't know if this character is in the comic book or not. Forgive me if I'm wrong there, but I'm really becoming a Connie fan every single week, and I like the pairing of her and Daryl very much.
Yeah, say what you will about The Walking Dead, like as frustrated as the show is, it is very much consistently like the most progressive show on TV when you consider the variety of backgrounds and ethnicities and races and sexual orientations and characters with disabilities. It really they really go out of their way to make sure that different populations are represented and represented well. And, as much as I get frustrated with the show, that is one of the great things about it ever since it started, just how kind of progressive the show is.
Well, it is a story about people in the situation, and I think you need to see the situation through everybody's eyes, and they really do a good job. The first couple seasons, it was a little rough because it seemed like they had a one African-American guy or woman minimum, and then once they got more than one, they were a goner. It was like a bad horror movie. You could see it coming from a mile away, and unfortunately, I kind of felt like Tyrese fell victim to that kind of plot device. IG, during our technically marred live show last week, we discussed the reoccurring symbol, and the fans were pretty sure that it was Alpha, but it turns out that it's a new group named the Highwaymen. Now, they roll Jerry and Diane and take their stuff and send them back with, which cracked me up, a grammatically correct ransom letter. In that moment, did you think, before we met the Highwaymen, do we need another villain group?
Sure, why not? It's one of the things that they've never really explored. They've always had kind of one bad group at a time, one group of people that they had to worry about. Having an additional group really kind of changes the dynamic of the whole show, and maybe for a good thing, because like my first few looks here at the Highwaymen, I'm really kind of digging it. They kind of look like a bunch of Civil War reenactors mixed with cowboys. They're carrying around muskets and black powder rifles and things like that, and monkey wrenches, because those two things go together, I guess. But they're just kind of really well acted and grammatically correct letters. The fact that they pointed that all out just makes me think that all these people that are like putting up things between your and there and there all over Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else that they can, they have a purpose. Should the apocalypse happen, there's somewhere for these people to live, because grammar's important, y'all. You got to make sure that people know your intent when you write down a message. I
can't believe he said grammar's important and then followed up by y'all.
Hey, that is grammatically correct if you live beneath the Mason-Dixon line.
So says you. Ryan, I know you pick up the nuances like I do. Did you get a little sense of Carol playing it cool when they brought up Jed's group? They couldn't be behind this, not for a moment. Carol had a lot of great moments in this episode, and that was definitely one of them. What did you think of her performance and that little, smile nod to the audience like, nope, can't be Jed?
Yeah, I think her performance is good. I felt like that seems a little on the nose. Like, I wish they would have maybe cut a line or two, like right off the bat. It's like, okay, yeah, clearly she knows what she did, and maybe if they gave her she had like a knowing smile or knowing look and they just cut. But I feel like that exchange went on like a line or two too much. And again, it's like we all know, and the show wanted to make sure that we all knew, the show knew that we knew. And if we didn't, they were going to make sure, again, by just focusing on her a little bit. So I feel like they could have been a little bit more subtle about that. But either way, I did like her performance, just throughout that entire scene. And I guess to go back, one thing I'll say with the Highwaymen, I don't love the name. It's kind of corny, but besides that, they were kind of menacing. And I'm a little afraid that they went from menacing to a joke in the course of an episode. I hope that they are, they don't need to be a threat, but that they maintain some of the menace that they did show, at least early on.
IG, I'm not sure if Connie is safer with Daryl or vice versa, but the idea of the Chokepoint, to lure the Whisperers away from their guardians, which, by the way, is a creepy fucking name. They call them guardians. Do you think it was a sound one? And if you were with them, would you one up in that building?
I think it's a good plan given what's available. You really need something else, and they do have a lack of expendable firepower, right? They can't just shoot arrows forever, bullets forever, because they just don't have the ability to restock that easily. So you need to do something. And this was as good a plan as any, but there was still more than one way to go. And that's the problem, is you really needed to choke it into one spot, and they gave them two. And they just didn't have enough people to maintain that. And so, they suspended disbelief a little bit, because I know it's a TV show and they got to make things work for a TV show. But yeah, are the walkers going to get through their little trap that they set? No, they're not. So now you're going to separate them. But you still got to deal with them when they come up.
So would you have gone up in the building? Do you think that was the best course of action?
If they really want... See, I don't think the best course of action was to enact anything at that point anyway. They had a head start on them. The Whisperers tend to only move as fast as a herd is going to move. I would have hightailed it back to more secure location and done things where I know where everything is versus a building. However, Connie had that building set up and scouted properly. So, there are some advantages to using it there. The problem is you just don't have the manpower to repel some of the stuff should it really go bad. So that was really a break point for them. If they lost there, it was all done. And that's the problem. So would I have gone there? No, but I like that they did it because it was fun for the show.
Ryan, we'll go back to what you were talking about. The kingdom is in a why can't we be friends mode as they choose to offer the highwaymen dinner and a movie and access to the fair rather than violence. Do you think that the two groups were a little too quick to trust each other? I mean, these guys are asphalt pirates.
Yeah, exactly. That's what bugs me a little bit. Is like they were asphalt pirates. Again, pretty menacing. I was scared of them, and then within a scene, they're mesmerized by the fact that they get to watch a movie. And again, it's like, well, why not just force it, And then beyond that, they kind of show up as we're the protectors, later on, and it's just like, okay, that was a little too quick. And either there's going to be some kind of a turn at some point, or it was just kind of, they went from a potentially menacing group to buddy with everybody, and it was just a little too quick. And one of the few things that I will nitpick for the show this week, actually, but yeah, that bugged me a little bit.
How mad are they going to be, by the way? Is if they go through all this and doing all this and being a part of it so that they can go watch a movie, and the movie they put on is Ishtar. If that's the movie they put on for me, like, I'm going to kill people in the movie theater.
And by the way, the leader of the Highwaymen's actor by the name of Angus Sampson, and he was on a few seasons ago, Fargo. He was one of the main bad guys in it, and he was absolutely amazing, that kind of big, dumb buffoon. But I kind of like him in this role. I have a feeling that eventually the Highwaymen end up being whisperer bait. Because if you look at the dynamic of the kingdom, there's not too many more people they can lose. These guys are perfect fodder to the king sticks his head out and, they're not there anymore because, they're either walkers or they're just slaughtered alongside the road. So I have a feeling that's their ultimate goal. I don't know if they turn on the kingdom or not, but I think that it was a little quick. And Carol's offer of a movie, I went through several different emotions, and then I just had to smile and go, isn't that adorable? Because she turned on charming. We're just getting to Carol, Alexander Carol, where it's like, oh no, I don't kill anybody. All I do is bake and clean. And I thought that was kind of a great callback to that. She goes from killer to smiling house mom at the drop of a hat. Henry and Lydia grow closer by the episode, IG, but does their romance make you care about the characters, and does it make them more likable?
Well, the thing is I like Lydia. I think the character is intriguing and fun to watch, and the story is there enough for her, coming from the Whispers and coming from the past that they showed us a few episodes ago, that, like, initially, like, I've already developed some kind of feeling like if something happens to Lydia, because I understand how tough her life was and the potential for her to have a better life. Henry, however, I've just never really been a fan. Like, just all the way back to when Henry's brother died and I don't care. Like, anything can happen to Henry, and that's fine. And you would think that maybe this would be how they make Henry likable. And I'll admit that I admire that he went after Lydia when she was given back to the Whisperers. But I still, like, if Beta would have killed him last week, fine, that's okay. If you do that just to drive the story so we can get more things going on for real, that's fine, because it really seems like they're just hanging him out there like a carrot on a stick just to keep things moving a little bit, but he's not an interesting or tasty carrot on a stick. He's just there. And I think they could do more beneficial things and more entertaining things using Lydia than they are with Henry. And I am not a Henry fan. I don't dig him. I don't think he's great, and they can kill him anytime now, and I'd be okay.
I agree. I wouldn't have shed any tears if he died. However, I think that they're a pair, and I think that they're building towards some sort of storyline with them. So I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon, but the redemption arc of him actually caring about her and going after her and saying, we don't need to live in a community, we can run off, it's a big world. I kind of dug that a little bit. I guess I dug the whimsy and the romance of it all, that those two are going to go out and fight against the world. I'm not a huge fan of Henry, but I think that they're trying to make strides to redeem him a little bit from what he was earlier. And I am digging kind of the Morgan staff play, where he's disarming people. He just kind of needs to finish them or take up some jiu-jitsu. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Henry fan. Just in general, TV shows have a hard time getting teenagers right. And it's, they either make them too moody or too, wanting to be independent, or, it's just, they never seem to kind of get it right. And I don't think they got it right with Henry. They were getting it right with Carl, and then they killed him off. And I think Henry's got a lot of the, he's kind of taking over for Carl, and where much of Carl's story would have gone, if I'm, correct about kind of where the comics went. And yeah, he's just not an interesting character. The actor's fine, but he's kind of wooden, kind of monotone. It's kind of boring. It's kind of salvaged by, shockingly, the fact that Norman Reedus has really picked it up. And to my surprise, he stepped up his game, acting wise. And in the scene, in this episode, it was strong in part because of his performance. But yeah, as far as Henry's concerned, kind of boring. Don't love that a lot of this episode was centered on him.
Daryl may shun the whole female cast and some of the male cast and the millions of fangirls that want to see him in an on-screen romance. IG, but bro, what's up with the cock blocking? I mean, Henry's just getting a little smooch. You never know when it's going to be your last day on Earth, and he's got to come in and kind of interrupt everything.
Talk about the worst timing ever. I mean, Daryl, this is supposed to be your bro, man. This is supposed to be your guy. You're kind of guiding him along life and helping him out. And you're going to jump in at that moment? Dude, just back off and go, I'm sorry. You guys take a couple minutes. We got this. Just here, hang a sock on the door and let us know when you're done. Something, because that was just unfortunate for poor old Henry, because he could be literally any time. It could be his time. I mean, I'm thinking just because of the way that the show works, Henry's going to live through the end of the season. He'll be in next season. But it could be any time. That's the zombie apocalypse. This whole, if people are wanting to do things and they're both consensual in the zombie apocalypse, let them go. Let them do their thing. Daryl, nobody stopped you from living out in the woods and living with dog and eating dirt. So why should Henry not be able to kiss a girl at least once? You just got to mess it up for him, man. I'm sorry for Henry in that. Like I said, I don't really care so much about Henry, but that just wasn't fair. Like, Henry needs something.
I know they need to up the tension and up the drama, but Ryan, trouble on the road for Tara and company as they're clearing trees away and they're attacked by walkers, and which they go to meet. And it was kind of a great scene where they were all running to battle. But did you notice that they left the most inexperienced people to guard the rear? I mean, couldn't they left Magna or fake Glenn behind? I
mean, the whole scene was just for them to meet the Highwaymen and for the Highwaymen to come to the rescue and to show us that they're now going to protect, the highways instead of robbing people. It was just kind of silly. But yeah, terrible strategy, because they basically left people and horses that were not very. Although Brett Butler did an amazing job.
The world's greatest babysitter, as admitted by
exactly.
Ryan George.
World's greatest babysitter. It was awesome killing walkers, so that was a great little scene for her.
But, you were in safe hands as a child, Ryan.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Did she stick you in a treasure chest full of breathing holes? I mean,
and beat off the neighborhood junkies with a stick, just like she has practice. That's why that was so realistic. She did this on the streets of New York. This is real. She practiced with Ryan George as an infant. This is all
the young Ryan.
Wasn't quite an infant, but yeah.
IG, do you think that was written in the contract by Brett Butler that she had to do one ass kicking at least? It had to be contractually obligated, right?
Oh, got to be contractually obligated, because, I mean, watching her run from walker to walker, Brett Butler is no longer young. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. That was about the most painful-looking movement between two places that I've seen in a long time, and I'm currently battling gout. That looked worse than what I'm going on with. Oh my God, that was so terrible. She's like, I'm like, can somebody get her a chair and push her along or something? But when she got from point A to point B, she took him out pretty effectively. So yeah, I think it's got to be contractually obligated, or they need to get her, I don't know, what are those called? A Segway? Get her a Segway to chase walkers on, then she'd be good.
A jazzy?
Yeah.
And she rides up on a jazzy start. Well, they would probably still move faster than the walkers. Another nuance, Ryan, that I kind of saw when the highwaymen rode in and saved the day, and looks like they must have struck a deal with the kingdom to protect the roads. Did you notice the look between Tara and the leader of the highwaymen? Almost like they knew each other, have seen each other before?
No, I didn't notice that.
God damn it, Ryan. IG. Did you notice the look between Tara and the highwayman leader?
I'm thinking maybe the highwayman leader is a former like wrestling face or something. Maybe she's just like always been a wrestling fan and watched him. He kind of looks that way, right? He could be WWE type material. No, really did look like she knew him personally though. And I'm really hoping that there's something there. I'm really hoping, because like if there's got to be some groups that have people that know each other. I mean, obviously, like Morgan went all the way out east toward Texas and everything, and there's people out on all the way west toward Texas, and there's people east on the East Coast that know him. So there's got to be other people that know each other that are hundreds, if not thousands of miles apart. Obviously, there's groups of people out there. I'm hoping that it's something like that, and she's going to go either, yeah, we can trust him because I know him because of X or Y, or no, don't trust him because he stole my dog when I was 12. Whatever it is. I was
hoping in a past life that he was Captain Insano, because Captain Insano shows no mercy. The one thing that bothered me about the introduction of the highwaymen, IG and I, you and I spoke about this last week. You know, they're kind of like a Robin Hood type group, but they aren't giving to the poor, they're giving to themselves. And that would have been the perfect opportunity for Negan to grab a group and lead it and kind of get forgiveness from Alexandria and the other communities for the things that he did. I mean, Negan out there with those guys kind of kicking ass, keeping the roads clear would be a pretty awesome sight, right?
It would be a perfect job for him to do. And maybe that's where they'll see that opportunity before the end of the season and place Negan there, because I don't think they're going to keep him in that cell. I don't think that they know that they're beyond that point. He's been out. He came back. He's shown remorse. He's doing some good things. So he's got to do something. You're not going to keep someone who acts as well as Jeffrey Dean Morgan locked in a room for the next 2 seasons. It's just not going to happen.
And they're paid per episode. For him to do one scene for a minute and a half is a colossal waste of money, especially when he could carry the show on his own. Ryan, the Battle of Chokepoint was quick but eventful. Lydia put herself out there to save Henry with the assist from Dog. Connie showed up, and she actually showed that she could hold her own against the living as well as the dead. But the main event was Daryl versus Beta. Your thoughts on the showdown, the episode, and your rating?
The showdown was great. So, you know, kind of a highly anticipated I guess action sequence. We all knew it was coming. I love I'm forgetting the actor's name, but I love Beta's
Ryan Hurst.
Ryan Hurst. Love his physicality, especially in that, as a Whisper, he doesn't say much, but he really, again, I keep coming back to this word for this episode, but he's menacing. He's really scary. He looks like, and the way that he picks Daryl up and just tosses him like a ragdoll. I'm wondering, like, is it really him doing that, or do they have Daryl on strings, because he just tosses him like he's nothing? So he really portrays somebody that's just physically terrifying. And then even that little kind of coming back from the dead at the end of the episode, he's really a scary character and formidable. And I wonder how long I wonder, like, if Beta needs to look. Alpha needs to look out for him, because why isn't he the leader? I haven't been on for the last couple episodes, but these last 3 episodes of The Walking Dead, it's the best the show's been in years. And I've said this before, but like Walking Dead, when it's good, it's an exploration into what the world is like when society breaks. When it leans into that, that's when the show's good. When the show started, it was about kind of that holy shit moment where it's just about survival. And then it became about building kind of a society. And I think where things started to falter was when they would just kind of meander on and not focus on that world, and or they'd be in conflict with kind of a wannabe dictator, whether it was a governor or whether it was Negan. And I think this is where the show's really interesting, because you have these societies are building, and then you have this weird group like the Whisperers that's almost cult like in the way that they talk about the Walkers. And then there seems like the show kind of has a direction that it didn't have for a long time. I think for a long time, we all knew the direction was season finale and we'll just get filler. And it finally feels like they're really writing with some purpose. And so, yeah, this episode, it was really, really strong. I think the last few have been strong. I'd give it about 8.5 for this episode. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually excited week to week to see what happens. That's the first, again, in a really long time.
All right, so the showdown between Beta and Daryl was just pretty much everything that we would hoped that any fight with Conor McGregor would be, any fight with Mike Tyson would be, but generally we didn't get, because a lot of those fights ended quickly, but this just drug on, but it was just brutal both directions, and it just showed, like, I don't know, there have been fights in the past in superhero movies and other things where there's always one big guy. Like if you think about The Punisher with Thomas Jane, that big Russian dude that showed up to beat him up. Like Thomas Jane just kept going after him and stabbing him and everything else, and he just kept coming after him. And that was Beta to a T in this. And that's my favorite scene in that whole movie. This Beta is just, like Ryan said, menacing, huge, powerful, violent, but still at the same time very stoic. And like he has feelings, but he's not a rage monster. I love the fight. I can't believe that he went down an elevator shaft, however many stories he went, and survived. Like, again, got to suspend disbelief, because that was one hell of a fall, because it was a good 4 to 5 second fall that you heard him tumbling down the elevator shaft. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole episode. I enjoyed that we had the nice little hidey hole way up in this hospital or building that was going on. With Connie, that she had it purely stocked with medical supplies and water and food. I just thought that was really cool, that these people have been out so long that they have multiple places set up that they can go hide and survive for an extended amount of time if they need to. The fact that they're showing these things are still in existence out there, I like that the show is going there. I like that we're actually almost at the fair and we're seeing that they're actually going to do something. It's not going to be just a bunch of people show up to a massacre. It looks like there's going to be a little bit of time for celebration before all hell breaks loose, which I totally believe it's going to. There's going to be some big problems when this fair kicks off. We've only got a few episodes left of this half season. I'm excited for them. I give this one an 8.5, just like Ryan.
Chokepoint to me was by far the best episode of the season all around. And I'm going to hate to say it, but my favorite Daryl episode in a long time, maybe all the way back to season 2. Great stuff from the rest of the cast, including Carol and Connie, and Ryan Hurst's Beta is just a force to be reckoned with. The fair has me on edge a little bit because I'm not sure where it's going to go, and I don't know if I trust the Highwaymen all the way, but I can't wait for next week's episode. Spring is about here, Game of Thrones is about here, and Walking Dead is ramping it up for the end of the season. I'll give Chokepoint a 9. As we go deeper down the Marvel bench, we're going to know less and less about these characters unless you're a hardcore comic person, kind of like yourself. But but was the hype real? I mean, Nick Fury took out a pager at the end of Endgame in desperation just before he turned into Ash. And what did he do in his last moments? He called Captain Marvel. The movie is here. The movie's here. Her time is here. So let's talk about it. How much did you know about Captain Marvel, the character, going into it? And were you more of a fan when you left the theater?
I was not a huge fan of Captain Marvel previously. And I can't say that my opinion improved at all after having seen the movie. I kind of left feeling very meh.
Well, I think some of it is origin film syndrome, though. I mean, how many of these things can we do? And how many different ways can you do them before it just becomes kind of passé as far as quality and everything else? One thing I did love about walking into this was the second that it popped up was that Stan Lee open. I mean, I love the hell out of it. I thought it was a great shout out to the man, that we're really going to miss. IG, what did you think of the movie in general, and were you a fan of Captain Marvel more so leaving the theater?
Well, more so than I was going in, yes, absolutely. I'm more of a fan, and seeing some of the things that she was done, it was acted well. Brie Larson did a good job, but it's all a setup. And now let's all think about the setup movies, all of the origin movies that we've gotten in the MCU. The only one that was really knock it out of the park good was Iron Man. The first Thor movie, not great. Captain America, the First Avenger, not great. So they have a history of they're okay movies, more mad than anything else, but you got to set up this character. And it's really important, especially with these lesser known characters, because Captain Marvel is a very powerful character. And if you go and look up the history and look up things in Marvel comic books and on the internet, this is one of the most powerful characters in existence. But nobody knows about her because she's not Spider-Man. She's not Captain America. She's not Black Panther. Nobody knows about her. And even Black Panther is kind of a B tier until now. Now he's totally an A tier character, which I love, but I diverse. Yes, I'm more excited going in, but I went in with lower expectations knowing this is another origin story. But the difference this time, it's not like another Spider-Man origin story where everybody knows how Spider-Man became Spider-Man. Nobody really knew anything about Captain Marvel before this, so they had to set everything up, and that takes time, and it took a lot of this movie to do.
Well, Kim, you said you were kind of underwhelmed with the movie. Do you feel that they've gone too deep into the bench, and that the possibility of getting the next Deadpool is kind of a thing of the past, that maybe they should start recycling some of the older characters and maybe recasting them?
I wouldn't say necessarily recasting. I think they've been very strong with who they have casted for the roles that they've actually placed. I would say that, in my opinion, Captain Marvel was obviously well written. Right. There was a ton of backstory to it. Marvel tends to have a very common recipe for all of their movies when it comes to those origin flicks. You've got the flash forwards, there's the initial battle that's usually won. Then there's the big brawl. And then at the end, somebody wins and always comes out on top. It's the same recipe that they use in every movie. And I don't want to say that feels like it's cliche, but I don't feel personally, I guess maybe as a female walking in and really having high expectations of, this is just going to feel empowering, especially being on International Women's Day and whatnot. I don't know. I don't think they need to be recasting people, but, he's right. The origin stories always do tend to come off a little bland and, need some seasoning as they go through. But I kind of feel like they gave almost too much information away in this movie and all the way through the end credits. Like, I don't know if there's anything much else to look forward to in the next movie.
So I was going to say, I disagree a little bit on the origin story part with you guys, just in that it was an origin story, but what they did something different, in that really the actual origin story was more done by exposition. Like, I felt like this was more like Black Panther, where, as far as the movie was concerned, she was already a character. She already, had powers. The difference in this situation was she was dealing with her amnesia. And so, as an audience, we're kind of learning who she is as she's learning who she is. And so where I think the issue is that for a lot of the movie, there wasn't really... It wasn't grounded emotional. Like there was nothing grounding the movie. There's nothing, it's not grounding, but nothing tying us kind of emotionally to the movie. So it just felt like I was kind of passively watching it, really, until the little girl. She was the emotional core, and that was 2/3 of the way into the movie. She's the one that really made you feel something about the movie. And so I think that the issue was less about it being origin story. I think you guys are right that it did follow the Marvel formula. Sprinkle in some comedy. You kind of hit your points. You got your big your big CGI battle. You got a couple battles in the middle, and mix it together, and you've got your movie. And I think the issue was, though, that they just didn't do a good enough job of time, kind of pulling us in as an audience. So we were just kind of watching it until 2/3 of the way in, and by that point, it really it did some good things. But I think that I just always felt like I was watching it and that I wasn't experiencing it. And I think that's the difference between that and like a Black Panther or an Infinity War. To kind of bring up some of the bigger movies and better movies that they've done recently.
Well, one thing that's been on my mind, Ryan, and a few actors, including Ethan Hawke, have said that over the last few years, they've claimed comic book movies aren't real movies and they're ruining cinema. Sounds pretty salty to me. But in Captain Marvel, we have Annette Bening and Jude Law. And other films, we've seen Anthony Hopkins, Michael Douglas, Robert Redford. I mean, is this a case of you can't beat them, join them? Or are these A-listers legitimizing these films?
I think it's both. I think that, on one hand, it's a huge paycheck. No doubt about that. But this is our generation, and it's our generation storytelling. And it's something that, they have done a good job of telling great stories with, the effects effects and with the action. And I think that, I disagree that you can't make these movies great cinema. We've seen that. I do think there is a break where, almost every movie can't get the third act right. And that tends to be an issue with a lot of the comic book movies. But otherwise, I think that they can be great stories. They are great stories. And there's a well of, almost, 80 years worth of material to pull from. So, yeah, I think that it's just people being a little salty. Maybe they didn't get a part that they wanted. Maybe they want to sit on their high horse and act in their, $200,000 independent movie. And, whatever. You can make anything great. It's about, how is it written well and is it acted well? And you can do that with, a big budget movie. You can do it with a small movie. It doesn't really matter.
Well, IG, being children of the 90s ourselves, wink, wink, did you love all the 90s callbacks, including Blockbuster, payphones, internet cafes, and the music seemed to be on point? And my favorite of all, that the fact that you wore a Nine Inch Nails shirt through most of the movie?
How can you not love the 90s throwback stuff? And like you said, that was our early adulthood time, was the early 90s. And yeah, there was a Blockbuster like every 3 blocks. And music was a big part of our lives, and they got the soundtrack right in this movie. And I really appreciate that just as much as I appreciated the soundtrack in the Guardians of the Galaxy's movies, because they're equally great as far as soundtracks go. And the Nine Inch Nails shirt alone is enough for you to go see the movie. That should be just enough for about most of us that grew up in that era to go see it. But literally sitting in the internet cafe, listening to that dial-up tone, man, it just almost gave me just shivers down my spine, because I'm like, oh my God, I remember doing that. Because I had to have a second phone line installed into the house so that I could run a 5600 baud modem. And that was after I upgraded from my 1200 baud modem, just to try and get to the internet. And loading a picture, man, it'd be like 2-3 minutes to look at a picture on the internet. And not even a great picture. But that being said, there was so much that they got right in the 90s that even anything they got wrong can be just overlooked. It was a lot of fun. And that's one thing that, like, you can be mad about the characters and the story and everything, but they get it right so often in these Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. So many things they do right from beginning to end. There are things that aren't great. There are things that don't follow the character's true story or whatever, if you just are completely devoted to the comics. But so what? Are the movies fun? Are they entertaining? Are things in there representative of the time frame they're trying to look at? Generally, yes. And it's so much fun to watch. And that's really all we're looking for, really, ladies and gentlemen, is a little bit of 2-hour get out of our own lives, get out of our own head, and go watch something. And Captain Marvel delivers in that way.
Nothing made me laugh harder than him pointing out Radio Shack as a place to get electronic supplies, advanced electronic supplies. That's hilarious. Radio Shack always sucked. Kim, let's talk a little Brie Larson. She's an Oscar winner for a role in Room. I was a big fan of her on the United States of Terror, but was she right for the role?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't feel, playing off of what MG mentioned with not tying into the character and not making you feel like you're connected to it. I don't know if she did that for me. I think that she acted well, and I think that on marketing pieces she looks great, but I don't know if it was enough for people like myself. For example, I went and seen the movie with a friend of mine who just flat out fell asleep during the movie. And she's a diehard Marvel fan as well. And I kind of get the feeling like maybe it could have been better. In the comics, she's very sharp-toothed. She's very in your face, doesn't care. She's very, powerful in that sense. And, they keep alluding in throughout the entire movie that she needed to watch her emotions, but she was very stoned the entire movie, minimal facial expressions and, except for that tiny little smirk. And, they mentioned it to her, Jude Law's character, Jan Rog, says it to her like 2 or 3 times throughout the movie, you gotta watch your emotions. And I'm just sitting there thinking she has none, and yeah, I totally get it. That little girl, I mean, gosh, when she was like, I kept all your stuff and I have your jacket, I was like, oh, there it is. Aw, she's adorable.
And we really didn't get to see too much of her before the accident happened to really understand the change in the character, if there was one. Was she always this way, or was she like a fun-loving, emotional, high-risk taker? They really didn't give us much context in that way. And I want all three of you to weigh on this before we go any deeper into the story. We unfortunately can't skip over the fact that during her press run, Brie said some things that got the internet trolls a little angry. More about the media being too white and too male. Was she correct in that? I mean, or is this another case of an actor using their movie platform to push their personal agenda? What do you think, Kim?
Probably personal agenda pushing. Tried very hard to keep an open mind going into the movie with, sans that information, not paying attention so much to that and just focusing on the quality of the film itself. It's hard to deny, when somebody has a platform like that and they're saying such racially or politically driven things, it kind of puts a salty taste in your mouth.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes they get asked the same question over and over again, and they want to mix it up, but that's usually done with a wink and a nod. This seemed like it was kind of a pre-planned thing, and being white myself and being loosely part of the media, I kind of had an adverse reaction to it at first, and then I sat and I thought about it, and I said, you know what? If that's her opinion, I'm not paying her. Marvel's paying her. Disney's paying her. So if she wants to kind of tank the opening, it's not going to stop me from going to see it because I'm a superhero fan. I don't have to like her personally to like her movies. I don't have to like her politics. I don't have to like her personality, because I do find her really grating as a person. As an actress, I think she's very good. But when she opens her mouth to say something unscripted, I really don't like her as a person. What do you think, Ryan?
I think in context, I get what she was trying to say. I think she just didn't say it well. She could have mentioned that, this is a situation in a lot of facets of life. We'd like more diversity. We'd like more women representation. We'd like more representation from minorities. And there's a way to say that without saying, all right, all you white males, get out of here, And so I think that, the quote kind of sounded like that. And then if you just read it, it comes across like that. And I think just her way, kind of her presentation, can come across poorly. So, I get what she was trying to say, and I don't disagree with it. But again, I think it should be more about bringing in, more diversity rather than kind of trying to exclude people from it. So yeah, like anything, look, they speak, they're talking constantly at these press junkets and to media, and it's pretty hard not to find a couple of rough quotes. But I would say definitely she's made a few gaffes on this press tour. But yeah, I get it. I just think maybe she needs to talk with her publicist before these press junkets.
Her publicist needs a taser, is what they need whenever she goes off the chart. She just needs to get buzzed. IG, you want to weigh in, or you want to move on?
Yeah, no. The biggest problem with this is that something that happens a lot in Hollywood, and here's what it is these stars get a bunch of money, and then they realize that they get a bunch of following, and they get a bunch of people that listen to them. But that doesn't mean that you're right. Just because people listen to you doesn't make you right. What's her name that wants women to steam their vaginas? Does that make her right?
Is it Gwyneth Paltrow?
Gwyneth Paltrow?
Yes. She's got a huge following of people that listen to everything she says, and most of it is nonsense, and some of it will harm you. But she says it anyway. All these people that go out on their political rants and telling people who they should vote for, you are actors. You're not politicists. You don't have any more knowledge than the average Joe on the street is. And I really wish that they would stop using their platform for evil. If you want to sell Diet Coke, go ahead, do your thing. But don't sell the next presidential election. Don't sell your latest viewpoint on where the media should go. If you have a viewpoint on who you should talk to in the media, then only agree to talk to those people. And that's fine. I don't have any problem with that, but the media is what it is. And if your livelihood is going to depend on who's allowed to talk to you or review your movie, do you really want to take more than 50% of them and shun them and push them off to the side? I don't think Disney and Marvel are going to be real happy with those kind of decisions. And do you want to keep that paycheck rolling in so that you can do more later? Or I don't know. I have a huge problem with stars using their quote unquote star power to try and elevate some position that is away from what they're supposed to be doing. Because I'm the same way with sports stars that want to have their political viewpoint put onto the field on which they play. If you want to do that on your own time, great. But when you're on the field, when you're doing your job, do your job.
I disagree a little, only to the point that I think there's a time and a place. So, if you're at a press junket for Captain Marvel, probably not the best place to air your political ideas or political laundry. But, there are plenty of actors, stars, athletes, celebrities that are, very politically active and very politically knowledgeable. Take someone like Rosario Dawson. She has an opinion, and I like things that she says, but she says it in settings where it's appropriate, and not while she's promoting Luke Cage. Plenty of other actors that on either whatever side they believe, where they pick and choose the right places to be political. Now I think there are things that are important enough that you do use your platform. So, I was 100% for Colin Kaepernick and any of the, football players, let's say, that wanted to protest, because I think there is a time and place where something is a big enough issue that you use your platform, but then you deal with the consequences, and it is what it is. But yeah, I think in general, it's like, if you're an actor and you're promoting your movie, promote your movie, and then do your political stuff wherever you want. If you want to write an article for, Vox or whatever, go ahead, do it. If you want to, donate money, go ahead, great, do it. Appear on whatever, media that you need to, but do it in the context of that political, whatever political activism you're involved in. Don't do it while you're promoting, a movie.
Well, perfect way to go about this is baseball. After every game, the media is there. Before every game, the media is there. And there was a player in the late 80s, early 90s named Eddie Murray. And after your career, the biggest thing that could happen to you once you're done playing baseball is to go into the Hall of Fame. Eddie Murray, for the extent of his career, treated the media like shit. Well, guess who votes on the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done? The media. And they would not put him anywhere near the Hall of Fame for the longest time. Listen, we all have hoops we got to jump through in life. We all, they've got to get through these press junkets. They've got to answer mindless questions from chuckleheads like myself. And I just think that like you guys said, there is a time and place for everything. IG, we get a look at the younger, two-eyed Nick Fury. Where do you fall on this whole controversy as far as the de-aging technology of actors? Do you think it's appropriate? Do you think they should use it more? Or do you think it's something that is just a device for storytelling?
I think it's really well used most of the time. I think they've done a great job. I mean, if we look back just not all that long ago in the second Tron movie, when they de-aged Jeff Bridges, he looked terrible in that. Now, I think he was supposed to look terrible because that was supposed to be the actual computer program as Jeff Bridges, but it still looked terrible. It took me out of the movie just to see the younger Jeff Bridges acting. They've gotten so good at this that I almost couldn't tell that they had applied anything to Sam Jackson. He just looked like Sam Jackson 15, 20 years ago. It was great. They really are doing a good job with this. So whether or not it's a tool for storytelling, it's working and it's doing a really good job. And I wasn't taken out at all watching him in this. And I liked it. I mean, maybe some of the problem is the voice still sounds like an older Sam Jackson because his voice has changed a little bit over the last 15 years. But you really got to pay attention to catch that. So Sam Jackson still sounds like Sam Jackson. There's just a little bit of nuance in it that is different. I like it. I really do like what they're doing with it.
Well, I like the fact that they're using it to tell a story that happened 20 years ago. I won't like it as much when we're making actors use their old faces to do current roles. And that's what I think people are really worried about with it. So I hope they don't go that route with it. Use those powers for good and keep them on that side. Kim, in what might be Sam Jackson's swan song as Nick Fury, we go back to the beginning and see the roots of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Avengers Initiative, and his relationship with Phil Coulson. Do you think it was a proper goodbye to that agent that we've kind of been the glue that's held the MCU together for the last 10 years?
I really do think it was well done. I enjoyed it immensely. To touch on the facial recognition, just if you think back to Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and Kurt Russell's role when they de-aged him for that, I mean, how far they've come from that until now. It was almost flawless. It took me quite some time before I realized, oh, crap. He actually looks like he's from the 90s. And, I just wanted to point that out, that I think that whatever they're doing in their design department is working, and they counteracted enough with the character's current day persona versus, those little flashbacks and what have you, or those little scenes, to more than make up for it. I don't feel like it's overkill.
How about you, Ryan? What did you think of Sam Jackson's part in this and his chemistry with Brie Larson?
I think de-aged Sam Jackson was the best thing about this movie, but by far. I think he was the only knock on it would be that he was so funny and so charismatic that it was unlike the Nick Fury we've grown to know in the MCU. It was almost a little jarring how much different he was. He was played more for comedic effect, but this is one of my favorite Sam Jackson, roles in a really long time. I thought he was great. I thought the de-aging was near perfect. There was one or two frames the whole movie, one with Coulson and one with him, where I kind of looked off, but otherwise I thought they got it perfect. I agree. I think use it for good, use it in spots where you do want to de-age a character that's integral to the movie, but you don't want to recast. Try to use it in spots, not all the time. But I thought his role was easily my favorite. Maybe Ben Mendelsohn I thought was phenomenal too, but just the supporting cast in general was great in the movie. But Sam Jackson was easily my favorite part of the movie.
And speaking of CGI, IG, I mean, this is a superhero flick, and every superhero flick we come across, they up the ante. What were your thoughts on the looks of Cap's powers and her outfit, the space scenes, the whole deal?
The way they did Cap herself, I thought was great, right? I liked how they incorporated things for space and underwater and things where they put the bubble over their masks and everything. I thought it was pretty well done. It didn't really take me out, which is really the key indicator. If it looks so campy that I'm like, what the hell is this animated BS in the middle of a live action movie, then we know something is wrong. And I didn't get taken out at any point with things for Captain Marvel and her team when she was with the Star Force. Now, when we're talking about the Skrulls and like when they're incorporating into Earth and trying to shape shift and things like that, there were some moments there where I was like, oh my God, that was pretty jarring CGI. Like the one that it was on the beach and turned into the surfer girl with the bathing suit and everything. Watching that transformation really kind of just messed me up for a moment, because I was like, that just looks weird. That's a really bad way to make that happen. I don't know who greenlit that transformation. I didn't like it. But for the most part, everything that had to do with the Star Force and Captain Marvel and all them was perfect. It was done very well. And I think that the suit was done well. And even when they animated portions of it to make things work better, none of it took me out. All the textures were good. All of the aging stuff on it all worked really well.
Ryan, the plot centered around Carol trying to figure out not only who she was, but what she was. And then we had a sign conflict as far as that pesky Tesseract is back again, and it's fell into the wrong hands. Was there enough meat on the bones to drive this story?
No, I think that was a problem. I think it took the amnesia trope and kind of turned it on its head, because we really didn't spend... often when amnesia is integral to the story and the character, that becomes the driving force, and it becomes kind of a mystery. And, it was kind of maybe a tertiary plot line, like she's kind of trying to figure out who she is, but not really actively, not at least until, really we get towards the, near the end. And even there, it never feels like it's really integral to the plot, which I liked. But then, like I said earlier, there's no emotional core. So, I did feel like the story was just a little looser than we were, would expect, especially when you have a situation where there's like these, different civilizations, in this massive war, and she's in the middle of it. And, I just feel like there were heavy kind of themes, but it was never really written in a way that really made me feel like there were stakes and I wanted to know what was going on, even though there were clearly stakes. It just, something about the writing just didn't really capture that for me. And so I just, again, felt like I was just kind of on along for the ride, but never really kind of experiencing this movie.
Well, the one thing I really loved about the MCU is the linear storyline of Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet. moving forward into Phase 4, Kim, are the Skrulls who are their ability basically to change into anyone, and the Kree who basically are lying technological advanced space bullies, as compelling as the Mad Titan? I mean, will they be able to pick the ball up, and will we be able to make 4 or 5 stories around these two potential villains?
I think they're definitely doing a bump set, and they're, they know that, yeah, there's a multitude of characters that they can use to create stories around, but I think that they have found common interest, especially among the younger generation of these subsidiary and these secondary cultures of people. There was, tons of Reddits about this after Guardians came out, talking about the Krees and the Skrulls and things like that after Peter Quill had mentioned them, and they wanted more information about it. So there's obviously a following for it, and I think that the MCU was keen to catch on to that, and they're paying attention to, in the future, who is the future audience of what we're creating, not just, the 20 and the 30 somethings and up, but, those kids that are right now that are following these storylines, and they're becoming, emotionally invested into these plots. And I think them creating a larger story around the Krees and the Skrulls, I think, is going to pay off for them big time in the future.
Well, and they left us with a sense that we really don't know who the villain is. They both potentially could be bad. It's just a matter of which side of the fence you're standing on, who's more evil than the next guy. I mean, one side's running with Ronan, the other side's kind of switching into people and murdering people at random. And so it's really hard to say. I know from old school comic books that that the Skrulls were bad guys. I mean, that although they would do this thing where we knew they were Skrulls because it would only be the Thing's arm or Captain America's shield or something that looked like Thor's hammer on this green space-like alien. I liked the presentation of them. I'm not sure really what the Kree bring to the table, but the Skrulls definitely were interesting. I just don't know how long that one-note gag of them changing into things could last. There's even theories going around that some of the Avengers might have been Skrulls the whole time. I really hope they kind of don't go that way. Ryan, in the end, Captain Marvel shakes off her self-doubt planted by the Kree, faces down Ronan the Accuser and her mentor, Yanrog, and gives Fury a pager to hold on to in case there's trouble. And then Goose the Cat eats the Tesseract. Your thoughts on the final scene, the final battle of the movie, and your rating? It's
kind of middle of the road, which is, unfortunate. I think if you look at some of the good things, like I listed, it's a serviceable movie. It follows the formula. It's entertaining. It's got some genuine laughs. I really loved I think Brie Larson was a little understated. It's like she was good. She was, kind of cocky and played that well. But I feel like there was another level she didn't quite get to. But I thought that the entire supporting cast was great. Again, I loved Samuel Jackson. I thought Ben Mendelsohn was great. Even Coulson for the, short bit he was in it is really good. I'm forgetting, her friend and the daughter, but they're really good. And again, provide some of that emotional weight, once it gets going. So, I think the performances were great. I like that they used the amnesia trope, or it was a different take on the amnesia trope, but they didn't, again, apply enough weight. And I love the Stan Lee cameo. It's probably the best Stan Lee cameo ever in any of these movies. And they pulled the double switch, which as old school pro wrestling fans, I liked, where they were able to take the, who you thought were the bad guys and make them good, and the good guys and made them bad, and they did it pretty seamlessly, and it worked well. But yeah, some of the negatives, like it was formulaic, and really highlights how close we are to these Marvel movies becoming just mediocre if we don't start to kind of really put a little bit more care into them, which maybe Marvel doesn't care because it made a ton of money. It was just boring. Like there were just periods where I was just kind of waiting for it to end. And then, you're going to get the inevitable comparison to Wonder Woman. and I just don't think it compares favorably to Wonder Woman. I don't think it's as charming. I don't think Brie Larson is as charming in the role as Gal Gadot. Again, it didn't have the emotional core that Wonder Woman had. And the other thing that this didn't have is and this, you can compare this to any of these superhero movies, but nothing in this movie compares to the No Man's Land scene. Like, you don't have that iconic scene that you can say, you know what, no matter what you think about this movie, that one scene was amazing. The CGI was fine, but again, nothing really stood out. So I really wanted to like it, and it was good. I just think for a Marvel movie, it was just kind of middle of the road, and makes me a little scared that they don't fall into this habit of just like, we can just throw out a mediocre movie and people are still going to go see it. So I would give it a 7. I like the character, and I hope that they're able to kind of really take the next movie, do something with it, but I'm a little afraid that she's so overpowered that they're going to really have to manufacture, some weaknesses, kind of like you have to do with Superman. So we'll see. But 7 is my final score.
I'm a little bit higher than you, Ryan, at a 7.5, but mostly it's because of Nick Fury, Sam Jackson's character. I really thought he brought it home in this movie. Like, even just him driving in the car with Captain Marvel explaining why everybody calls him Fury. I laughed through the whole thing. Like, what's your mom's name? Fury. Everything. I just laughed through the whole thing. And he just was so good in this movie, and it showed what kind of things must have happened to him, really, to go from that guy who was really just snarky, fun, full of life and everything, to end up how he did, which was still snarky and fun, but he was just so much more stoic in what would chronologically be later Marvel movies, although they were all previous to this. I think that what we suffer from here is they needed to get this movie done because they couldn't have just dropped Captain Marvel into the next Avengers movies without anybody knowing who she was. So they had to put something out there to give us something. Again, like I said, just like the first Avenger, Captain America, that movie was very meh. Like, the Red Skull is supposed to be one of the greatest bad guys in all comic book history. And in that movie, he was just nothing. There was nothing awesome about him. It just wasn't great. Well, here, the villains are better. And there's more entertaining things to go on. But the hero is less charismatic than Captain America. So we gain in one area, lose in another. That's why I'm giving it a 7.5. But I think that it needed to be around to get us ready for Endgame, which is 7 weeks away now? We're almost there. So it was a building block that had to be put there. It's not like if they hadn't used Spider-Man yet, but they're going to drop Spider-Man into Endgame. They could do that without Spider-Man having his own movie because everybody knows him. You needed something for Captain Marvel. So this was a passable effort for that. And I think that just like Thor Ragnarok revived the Thor series, they could do another movie where Captain Marvel does much better, but they're just going to have to get good writing, and somebody's going to have to tickle Brie Larson with a feather to get her to emote a little bit more.
I disagree with you completely on Captain America, but we'll talk about that off air. Kim?
Yeah, I'd have to probably give it a solid 6.5. I also a huge Samuel L. Jackson fan, and I cracked up probably way harder than I should have in the movie during that scene where he, what's your mom's name? And it's Fury. There was all these tiny little aspects of the movie that I just thought was absolutely fantastic, but I don't know if it was enough for me to compensate for the lack of power that I felt Captain Marvel herself should have had. When you think about Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman, you think of somebody who just has a commanding presence. She, just reigns excellence. She fights, exactly what she's about, and she delivers a strong message, and she's empowering for younger generations. And I don't feel like that was conveyed in Danvers, Brie Larson's character. I feel like it was, just kind of, you're right. We need to get something out there. Otherwise, people are going to be scratching their heads at the theater. And, here's a script, we're pretty good at pumping these things out now. So just run with it. 6.5 for me.
We've gone through countless superhero origin films at this point, and to say this movie broke new ground, it didn't. But for what it lacked in originality, it made up for in waves of nostalgia and humor. I loved the Stan Lee cameo. It was a heartfelt goodbye to Stan. And I love the fact that they stuck a Kevin Smith shout out in there, because Stan, I don't know if you guys noticed or not, was reading a Mallrats screen, which brought Kevin to tears when he saw it, and I'm a huge fan. But any movie that prominently displays a Nine Inch Nails t-shirt for a quarter of the movie is aces in my book. It won't get you points, but it will get you props. The final battle was slightly underwhelming, but it was funny as she knocked him out with one punch. And this movie was far from epic, but it did enough to launch the character. I'm not sure that I can say that I enjoyed Captain Marvel a lot, but as a movie as a whole, but there were parts of it that I was able to take away from that I did laugh out loud a few times. And I'll probably watch it again when it's out on Blu-ray. I'll rent it from the Redbox, but it's definitely not going to be one of those go-to Marvel movies that I watch again and again and again, like Civil War, like Infinity Wars, like Black Panther. So I'll give it a 7.
And that's it for another episode of the Cinik Radio Podcast. I'm Igrihe, here with Cinik, Ryan, and our new guest, Kim Caperton. You can find Kim over on Instagram at KMC Artworks. She's a great artist, lots of cool stuff to check out there. You can find the Cinik Radio Podcast at CINIKRADIO.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. You can find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO and on Instagram at Cinik Radio. We'll be back next week with more Walking Dead and other surprises. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.
I'm just telling you, Ishtar. That's what they're going to have to watch.